And I'll talk a little bit about the curfew that we are still under, and then I'll be glad to take your questions. So on the COVID front, these numbers are as of yesterday. In a couple hours, we'll probably have new numbers as of today. But yesterday was our lowest, the lowest number of people were hospitalized in almost a couple of months. So yesterday there were 307 people in the hospital. That's down 34 from the day before. So that's some good news here. In addition to that, there were only 15 people, and when I say yesterday, it's really 2 days ago, 15 people that were admitted to the hospital. So that is also good news. There was 11 the day before. So this is hovering between 10 and 20 people each day, which is a very modest amount. Now, of course, not if you're one of those 10 or 20 people. I understand that. But it is, those are good numbers. We have not had more than 35 people admitted to the hospital per day in more than a month. So that's good, because there were days that we had 70 people admitted. So the COVID is still among us. Don't think that just because these numbers are good that it means it's gone. It is not gone. It is still out there, but folks are still wearing their masks, still washing their hands, still social distancing, even as we begin to open the businesses a little bit more. And so if we can continue down that path, I think that looks good for us this summer, although there won't be, you know, we're still going to socially distance and wear our masks. We still have to do that. So that's good news on the COVID front, that the trend lines continue to move down. So on Wednesday, we talked about the protests that had occurred on Monday night, and on Tuesday morning, I put a 9 p.m. curfew in place for St. Louis City as a result of what happened on Monday night, which was a pretty terrible night for St. Louis, with 4 officers shot, 1 retired police captain shot and killed. I am glad to report that the 4 officers who were shot have been released from the hospital. They will recover. They've got a ways to go. 1 was shot in the arm, and 3 were shot in the legs or foot. And so it's still a very serious situation. But that curfew went in place for Tuesday night, 9 p.m. It is going to stay in place through this weekend. There are a number of protests planned for this weekend, both in the city of St. Louis and in St. Louis County. And we, of course, understand the anger and the grief caused by George Floyd's murder in Minneapolis, and any number of other individuals that have been killed over the last decades. Be off the streets, off the sidewalks by 9 p.m. this weekend. I'm hopeful we'll be able to lift this curfew in the not too distant future. And to be able to really re-engage, I guess. So I will say that, and I've received many emails over the last few days, and I will say that certainly the city of St. Louis, like many other cities, We are beginning a review of our own policies. We have a lot of good policies in place in our police department already, and we have excellent leadership in our police department in John Hayden, Chief John Hayden, and Public Safety Director Judge Jimmy Edwards. But we are still going to review our policies to be sure that we're doing all that we can to keep our officers safe and keep our residents and businesses safe. We will take every step possible to protect our officers, our people, our businesses, our institutions. We are doing that through a very tight-knit partnership with our federal partners, ATF, DEA, FBI, our state partners, Highway Patrol, with the National Guard. St. Louis County helped us out on Monday night as well. So a very tight-knit group in order to protect our people and our businesses and our property. And we will continue to do that. That's a high priority, our highest priority. So thank you for that, and I will be glad to take some questions. Do you have any questions, Jacob?
Well, John's question sounds like it was already answered. So the curfew will be extended through at least the weekend, correct?
It will, John.
And then a second question about the curfew, Mayor. Who do you feel like is being kept safe by the curfew? We feel like it's just to punish protesters and citizens.
Well, I don't know who the "we" is in that question. It's certainly not to punish protesters. It's not to punish citizens, although I'm sorry that it is a necessary thing. But you know, the protest leaders that I have spoken with also don't want to see the violence that occurred on Monday evening. So it is really in an effort to reduce the violence that was directed at law enforcement, directed at breaking windows, looting windows, burning buildings. It's directed to prevent that.
A COVID-19 related question. Many museums, institutions, and attractions are beginning to reopen.
Mm-hmm.
What have their plans been like for reopening, and how has the city reviewed them to make sure that it'll be safe to go there once they are open?
Great question. So Monday, June 8th, is the first day that we call it large venues, cultural institutions can reopen to the public. And some are opening on Monday. The aquarium is opening Monday, the Wheel, they are opening Monday. They have incredible operating procedures in effect, even to the extent of a thing that takes your temperature. I'm sorry, I can't think of the word of it. It takes your temperature. I believe it's infrared, so that folks that are going in are very easily, their temperature is screened. Having people go in just a certain number at a time, be able to socially distance. I saw a little video on the Wheel about how you and your family can go on a ride on the Wheel, and when you get out, the whole wheel is wiped down, the inside, the seats and all that are wiped down, then the next family or group is able to go. So they're very extensive procedures, both for their employees and the screening of their employees, but also for their visitors, and then for the cleaning and sanitation of the whole facility, and tables and chairs and the merry-go-round and all of those kinds of things. So that they're opening on Monday. The St. Louis Zoo is opening the next Saturday. I believe it's the 16th. The Botanical Gardens, I think they're opening on the 16th. So each one of the cultural institutions has a slightly different date that they're open. I think the Science Center maybe the 20th. Check the website before you go to any of those places. And most of those places, or many of those places, you do need a reservation to go. It doesn't cost anything, but they're trying to give people time slots. That even the zoo, trying to give you a time slot so that when you do want to go, you'll be able to get in at that time, and they won't have a big line or a bunch of people waiting. And so that's the part of their procedures for keeping everybody safe.
Another curfew question, Mayor. how are police choosing to enforce this, and who they stop and question if someone is seen after 9 p.m.?
So I think it depends on what activity the person is involved in. Don't forget that it's not that no one will be on the street after 9 p.m. If you're going to work or coming home from work, you can be doing that. If you need to seek medical treatment, you can be doing that. If you need to, going to work, coming home from work, if you're a journalist or credentialed journalist, that's fine, you can be out there. But as far as a protest goes, protests need to be over and folks off the street by 9. And so I would just encourage everybody, and it's really for everyone's benefit, I think, to be able to set a time when this activity ends. Because what we have seen, and you all know this, we have seen that often after 9 o'clock, sometimes 10, sometimes 11, but often that's when the violence begins to happen. Other folks may be in the group, or other folks may come out at that time who aren't just intent on nonviolent protest. They may be intent on other opportunities. So that's the reason for having the curfew, and it gives folks some parameters.
COVID-19 question. Small businesses in the city, when are they able and how are they able to apply for the city's small business grant fund?
Thanks for that question. You could begin applying 8 o'clock it was on Wednesday morning, this past Wednesday. So go online. We can post a link to that. We'll post it on our Facebook page. And apply. It'll give you the parameters of who can apply. It's $5,000, up to $5,000. Small businesses, 25 employees or less, fewer. And preference giving, at least 50% of the $4 million will be given to businesses that are in promise zone areas in the city. So you can apply now, and I would encourage you to go ahead and do that.
Another COVID-19 related question from Ryan, Mayor. The new cases per day that we announced, when do you think that those will actually start to decrease?
Ryan, I don't know the answer to that because we're doing so much more testing. We are identifying more cases. That does not mean that there are more cases, but previously we had so little testing that people didn't know it unless they were extremely sick. So I don't know that we're going to see necessarily a decrease in the number of new cases significantly, at least until this has run its course, if that's what happens. We don't know about that. One of the things I do want to talk about testing, though, can we talk about how everybody can get a test now?
Well, you just
I guess
said
we
it,
can.
so.
I guess I just did that. So, the City of St. Louis recently received a very large shipment of tests that we had on order for, goodness knows, a long time. And so, through the federally qualified health centers, anybody who wants a test or needs a test, and this is a diagnostic test, this isn't the test that tells you about antibodies, but anyone who needs or wants a diagnostic test can get one for free through the federally qualified health centers. You have to call there, you gotta get a time slot to do it. But many people have, and so testing is increasing, number of testing is increasing every day, and so that's good news. I think we have finally sort of solved the lack of testing. Now we do still have, there still is some lab capacity, because once you take the test it's got to be processed by a lab, but that's being worked through as well. So if you want to get tested to see if you have COVID-19, you can, and you don't have to have symptoms, because we know some people are asymptomatic but have it. So there are finally enough tests in the city of St. Louis for anybody who wants to be tested to be tested. So that's good news.
A question from Channel 2, Mayor. They'd like to know what your message is for recently reopened businesses who had to close under stay-at-home and now might have to be closing early due to the curfew.
So, the stay-at-home order was so tough on business. And when it's tough on business, it's tough on employees. And this recent curfew at 9 p.m. is certainly a burden, a difficulty. So we've had it now Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. We've had it for 3 nights. I expect we'll have it Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and I'm hopeful that we'll be able to lift the curfew on Monday. But we do have to see what happens here. But that is the goal, is to be able to do that. And the message is that it's very tough on business, and you've just been able to reopen. And we apologize for needing a curfew, but we do believe that we need a curfew at 9 o'clock right now.
A question from, and I hope I'm getting his name correctly, DeVault, I believe, would like to know, what do you think needs to be done, or what's your plan for strengthening relationships between community members and the police department?
Thank you, Deval, for that question. So when I hired Judge Jimmy Edwards a couple years ago, and soon after that, Chief John Hayden, I thought that they were 2 of the strongest people to be able to lead our police department in a community policing effort. And I think what you've seen from our police department is great restraint and tolerance over the last week of protesting. What you've also seen is more interaction with the community. Now, can there be more? Should there be more? Absolutely. We always need to do more. But I think that ability to do community policing and work with the community collaboratively is well placed in those 2 gentlemen.
Colleen's question is, why haven't we responded to calls to defund the police department?
So, Colleen, I did talk about that on Wednesday. I don't think defunding the police department is the answer, frankly. We know that most neighborhoods, most neighbors want to be able to call 911 and have the police respond when they have an issue. And defunding a police department is not a way to get a better police department. Now, by defunding, I'm not certain if you mean eliminating the police department, or I don't really know what your definition of defunding the police department is, but I don't plan to defund the police department.
A question, Rebecca, about COVID-19. Chris's question is, when will the 5 major parks in the city begin to allow more vehicular traffic, those roads that were closed, to give more social distancing?
So many people love having these roads closed in the big parks, at least from my interaction with folks. And so it's our goal to try to keep more space available for pedestrians, bike riders, because in almost 100% of the cases, there's room for cars to go around parks to get to where they need to go. Now, there will be some roads that reopen for example, in Forest Park, when it's necessary to be able to get to, say, the Art Museum or the zoo or the History Museum. There may be some reorienting of which roads are closed, but we are trying to keep some of those roads closed in order to give people that are walking and bike riding and their families room to do that in a socially distanced way. And that doesn't change. COVID hasn't gone away. We still have to socially distance, and we probably will keep a number of those roads closed.
A related question, has the city been able to during COVID-19, get more street and other public works projects done because fewer cars have been on the road?
That's a good question. One of the things that we were able to do was we did a fair amount of street paving while most businesses were closed, and particularly in the downtown area, which is usually so busy. that it's really hard to repave streets. So we pushed the temperature envelope a bit. The hotter it is for repaving, the better. If you think about that, that's that asphalt that's going down. The hotter it is, the smoother it goes down. But we pushed that a bit and have paved most of the streets that needed paving in downtown and near and around downtown. There's still some striping going on right now. I saw some painters out just the other day painting crosswalks and lines and that sort of thing. But that's one of the things that we were able to get done while, you know, a lot of the city was staying at home. And I think that's been a real, that's been a plus. And it went a little faster because we could work longer hours than when you're trying to pave between rush hours. Doesn't give you a lot of time. So that's one of the things that we were able to get done.
A question from Ariana, Mayor. Will the city or does the city currently ban chokeholds by the police department?
We do. We do. There was an order in
I think it was 2007.
2007, I think it was, that banned chokeholds. So.
A question about CARES Act dollars, Mayor. Are there funds that the city has received through the CARES Act that will be used towards social services that will help reduce violent crime?
Yes. We, through the CARES Act, block grant money, emergency ESG, it's called Emergency Solutions Grant money, emergency shelter grant money. That funding, virtually all of that is going into social services. It's going into rental assistance. We hope. I say this, it still has to pass the Board of Aldermen. Let me back up and say that. But we have proposed that that's where the funding goes. So it is going into primarily humanitarian efforts and also $4 million to support small businesses. So I think anytime you can put money into humanitarian efforts and into small businesses, if people can get back to work, that is a plus for reducing violent crime.
Earlier you mentioned that the city's in a position to be able to test anyone and everyone for COVID-19. A question about where people can get a test and what difference is the availability making on the curve?
So look on our website. I know you're online because you're watching me on Facebook. It'll give you a list of 10, I think it is, places where federally qualified health centers where you can go to get tested. What the actual testing itself doesn't affect the curve, but it does give more information to place in the curve. The reason that we are looking so closely at hospitalizations is that the more testing you do, obviously, the more cases in terms of raw numbers you're going to find. You may have a smaller percentage of people that are positive, which we have found that, but you do find more cases. But the real key here is how many people are admitted to the hospital, how many people are in the hospital. I think I mentioned there were 307 people in the hospital yesterday, and that's the lowest it's been in ages. So it doesn't, doing the testing doesn't affect the curve per se. But when we had so little testing, we weren't getting an accurate picture of what was going on. So now that we have adequate testing, more people can be tested, then you know, the idea here is identify people who are positive and then contact trace anybody who has had association with them, so that then those people, if you have been exposed to somebody who's positive, that you'll quarantine for 14 days since your exposure. And then if you do get it, you will not have exposed more people. That's really the key, and that's why doing more testing is so important, to identify positive cases and be able to quarantine their contacts.
A few more COVID-19 questions, Mayor. Catherine's question is, are restaurant employees required to wear masks? Is it specific like waiters but not for cooks?
All employees of businesses that are open are required to wear masks. Some in restaurants are also required to wear gloves, like people who work with food. That's a food safety code, which was around before we had COVID. But yes, all employees, whether you're in a restaurant, a retail shop, all of those employees are required to wear masks. And customers are strongly encouraged to wear masks. I know of a number of places who are also requiring their customers to wear a mask.
A question from Tricia, Mayor. I think you mentioned this in your CARES Act statement about rental assistance, but how are people going to be able to apply for that, and when might it become available?
So Tricia, that's probably going to be a few more weeks. You will be able to apply through our Human Services Department. It will be online at some point, but we have to wait for the Board of Aldermen to approve this funding. We proposed all these programs, but the Board of Aldermen, and I think they may have some changes that they want. We understand that. But yes, I think, we've got to wait for them to approve the funding before we can begin spending it. Be a few weeks.
A question from Joe, Mayor. Joe's question is, how would you suggest that someone in a high-risk population for COVID-19 get groceries during the curfew?
Well, during the curfew starts at 9, so if you're an older person or someone with an underlying health condition, you should, either get your groceries, have someone get your groceries for you. Depends on how serious your underlying health conditions are, I guess. Go during the hours when there are, I'm going to say available for seniors. Not everyone in a high-risk population is a senior, but many are. Or have someone get groceries for you, or order online if you're able to do that. That will keep you out of the grocery store. Certainly, if you're in a high-risk population, you really should not expand your circle much, because COVID is still out there. And you're more vulnerable if you're older or have underlying health conditions. So try to keep your circle tight.
A question from Elise, Mayor. Elise would like to know, in your opinion, how are the police helping? What's the rationale for keeping the police department?
Rationale for keeping the police department. Civilized society. I think, in my view, we certainly need the police department. I know if I have an emergency and I call 911, I sure hope they show up, just like I hope the fire department shows up. I don't think there's been any society yet who has been able to completely police itself. So I absolutely will be keeping the police department.
A curfew-related question, Mayor, from Robbie, who's watching. Would like to know what the city's parameters are for gauging when to end the curfew.
We'll base that on intelligence that our police department and federal authorities have. We'll base it on when protest organizers are able to manage the protest in such a way that it doesn't turn violent. So we're very hopeful that that is the case soon.
A question, can you tell us about the different pins you're wearing today?
Well, that's nice. Somebody noticed. Usually I wear the city flag, but today, I hope you all know, is End Gun Violence Day. Do we still have one of our little signs? I think it's somewhere else. That's okay. So these two pins are to commemorate ending gun violence. And one of them says what does it say? Eradicate gun violence.
I can't read, it's really small.
Yeah.
It says end gun violence.
End gun violence, and then
mayors.
mayors against illegal guns. So the two orange pins. Today was Wear Orange Day. I missed that memo. Apparently, I don't really have orange. But so if you do, wear it proudly.
A curfew-related question, Mayor, from Galena. Her parents are coming over for dinner. Do they have to leave by 9 p.m. to get home to the county?
They should.
Okay. A follow-up question on in gun violence, National in Gun Violence Day. Sherry would like to know what are some of the steps that you think the city's doing or taking to try and lessen gun violence in the city?
So that's a very big question, Sherry. In the state of Missouri, virtually anyone can carry a gun anywhere, anytime. There's only one exception to it, and that is if you're a convicted felon. Children can carry guns in the state of Missouri legally. One of the things that we have tried to do over and this has been since January of 2017, I think it was 17, maybe 18. I think it was January 2017 that our state legislature said no one needs a permit, no one needs any training. You're just free to carry anywhere, anytime, concealed or open carry. So one of the things that we'd like to see is from the state legislature is that cities or municipalities be allowed to require people to at least have a permit to carry a gun, and to get that permit that they have to go through some training. But we've not been successful at that because frankly, most of the state wants the state law to prevail as it is. Our case has been that urban areas, cities are different. We're a denser population than if you live in a rural community, and one size does not fit all on the laws. So with regard to gun legislation, Missouri is just about probably as loose on gun legislation as anywhere in the country. I don't know of anywhere that has looser gun laws than we do, or almost no gun laws. So we have worked on that, but I don't have any great hope for that. So gun violence is, guns are very easy to get, and in our community, and that results in a lot of gun violence. When people settle their differences with guns versus with words. You probably know that we have launched Cure Violence. Folks have been hired for the First Neighborhood for Cure Violence, which is an intervention program to try to intervene with people that are having beefs with one another, fights with one another, so try to intervene and not have them settle it with gunfire. That is just, the folks are being trained right now. That is just beginning to launch. We have, we'll shortly, within a week or 2 weeks, we will be awarding a second contract for a second group to work in another neighborhood. So we have hopes that will dampen some of the violence. But, you know, violence is a really big issue. You know, we should be doing more early childhood education, for example. Better education, better job opportunities, more hope for people. Those are the big categories of things that we believe would help to reduce gun violence.
Back to COVID-19, a question from Lisa, Mayor. What numbers do you need to see to open schools? Not that you get to decide to open schools, but to open schools as usual again. Do the students really have to physical distance to stay healthy?
So, the school systems will make their own decisions about when to open. And what you see is that they're all working on that right now. They're all struggling with the question of how do we reopen schools without increased exposure to COVID-19. You probably saw St. Louis University recently announce that they would be starting school in August, mid-August, a little earlier than usual, and that the first semester would end around Thanksgiving. So they will have in-person classes, but they won't, for example, have a fall break where people go home and come back and therefore maybe have more exposure. So every school is trying to deal with this. We're dealing with a similar thing this summer in terms of summer camps, day camps. And some of the things that are being done in day camps being called for by the CDC, I think will apply to schools as well. So for example, I spoke with the head of the Y yesterday, and their camps start on Monday, the 8th, yes. They start on Monday. They are having a smaller group of kids stay within one group with the same counselor for the whole time, not mixing of the groups, not field trips, not a big group lunch, so that if there is a positive case, that it is more confined and more able to contact trace. So I think schools will move in that direction as well. They are still developing their protocols. And, you know, someone said to me the other day, their child is 15, and they said with regard to distance learning, that he thought there was a lot more distance than there was learning. I mean, this is hard. Our kids have been out of school since about the middle of March. And I know that some kids are very disciplined and have gone online and done all their lessons, but, you know, there also needs to be that human interaction. So I hope that schools are able to safely open, but that's still developing. I mean, here we are on June the 5th. And so we've got 2.5 months until most schools would be reopening. So we've only been in this COVID thing about 2.5 months, as it is a little, not quite 3 months. Our first case in St. Louis was March the 16th, and here we are on June the 5th. So we're continuing, this is continuing to develop, and we're continuing to learn. So I hope kids are able to go back to school this fall. They probably will be socially distanced, and they probably will be wearing masks. They may be in smaller groups.
Lauren's question on COVID-19, what are the parameters about going into phase 2, and what does phase 2 look like?
So I think starting on Monday, when our large venues can open, all the businesses, well, and then the following Monday, fitness centers can open, gyms can open. So when that happens, all businesses will be able to be open with guidelines, with restrictions of social distancing, mask wearing, hand washing, sanitizing, that sort of thing. So the phase 2, I don't know if there really are going to be those phases as defined. What I think you're going to see is large venues will be able to, once they get started here for a couple of weeks, they will be able to increase their capacity a bit, so long as they are able to socially distance. I don't know that I'd really call it phase 2, but there will be a gradual, we cracked the door open this far, and there'll be a gradual reopening of the door, provided we continue to see the numbers stay down. And the numbers are really pretty good at this point, and that's thankfully to the good people of St. Louis and our region here, who stayed at home more or less for 8 weeks, and we're really able to tamp down this spread. So now we just have to continue to be cautious.
And then Dell's question related to COVID-19 is, who is doing contact tracing, and are there positions available?
Yes, thanks for that question. I just happen to have, I think I still have it here. So every public health agency, St. Louis City, St. Louis County, St. Charles, all are doing contact tracing. So contact tracing is done by your public health departments. And the city of St. Louis has about 25 positions open. Some of those positions still have to be funded through the CARES Act passed by the Board of Aldermen, but there is right now on our website, let me tell you, if you go to the city website, which is easy to find, stlouis-mo.gov, and there's a box on there if you want to work for the city. You click on that box and you go to apply to public health program representative, and then parentheses, COVID-19 virus contact tracing / investigator. Those jobs are available right now. So if you have the minimum qualifications, I'll read a couple of them to you. A college degree, bachelor's degree in maybe public health, nursing, this is pretty broad, biological sciences, social work, community health, psychology, plus 1 year of health outreach experience in communicable disease or an equivalent combination of education, training, and experience. That's the qualifications. You need a driver's license because you may have to go to someone, go track someone down. What else? Be willing to train and perform counseling and testing services, which include, these are some technical terms. So, desirable qualifications, good verbal communication skills, the ability to maintain sensitive, confidential information, experience performing counseling and testing services, which include venipuncture, OraSure testing, or quick testing, and other STD testing procedures. So it's all online. Please apply online if you're interested in being a contact tracer disease investigator. Good job, good department to work for, and very important right now.
This might be our last new question that we have time for today, but Ariana had a follow-up to your statement a little bit ago about the city's beginning to review public safety police policies. Wanted to know if that includes policies related to restraint and de-escalation.
Oh, sure, of course.
That's all of our new questions for
Okay.
today, Mayor.
Thank you all. Thank you for being here today. Have a great weekend. I hope we're going to have some nice weather here. Have a little bit of fun this weekend. If you are protesting this weekend, please wear your mask, and please be peaceful, nonviolent, and express your support for George Floyd and others in that way. So thank you very much.
This is not who we are as a community. This can't be who we are as a community or a country. That is why we must speak up against racial injustice and police brutality, because we cannot deny that systemic racism or police brutality exists in our country, or for that matter, our community. One of the most basic tenets of our country is the right to peacefully protest, or, as it is described in the First Amendment to our Constitution, the right of the people peaceably to assemble and to petition the government for a redress of grievances. Earlier yesterday, I was in Niagara Square saying we must always protect the right to peacefully protest. We all have an obligation to protect the right of others to free speech, peacefully protest, and grieve our government. Police and other law enforcement have a duty to serve and protect the public. We need them to be the guardians of the public, not warriors engaged in battle with the public. I know many police officers, and I know they serve with honor. And I know they were angered and disturbed at what they saw themselves, because it is unacceptable. That is why the officers must be held responsible for their actions. As has been announced, the officers have been suspended pending an ongoing investigation by the Buffalo Police Department. Additionally, District Attorney John Flynn announced his office is investigating the incident to determine if criminal action is warranted. I know District Attorney Flynn will do the right thing. Unlike other prosecutors elsewhere, or for that matter, in our own county's past, District Attorney Flynn has a proven history of pursuing prosecutions against law enforcement officers who break the law. I trust him to do the same in this matter. I believe all these actions must be taken and the proceedings play out because we live in a society that is governed by laws. A society where due process is guaranteed to all and people are presumed innocent until proven guilty. We can only address racial injustice and eliminate police brutality when we are united in our efforts and do so under the law. That is why we must jointly defend the rights of all to peacefully protest and support the members of law enforcement that truly honor their pledge to serve and protect the public. And we must work together to institute real reforms in police departments across our country, starting right here in Buffalo and Erie County. So I ask those who will peacefully protest, I ask those who will protest today and going forward to do so peacefully, so we can move our community forward. Let us go forward united in our efforts to create a more just and fair society to all. That is how we form a more perfect union for all. Finally, I want to offer on behalf of myself and the community my best wishes for a speedy recovery to the gentleman who was injured last night, Mr. Martin Gugino. I also want to offer on behalf of myself and the community my best wishes for a quick as recovery possible to Trooper Ronald Ensminger Jr., who, as we know, was most grievously injured when the vehicle ran over him on Monday night. I have been informed today by representatives from the Erie County Medical Center that he is progressing in his recovery, which is good news to hear. And we are all hoping that both of them recover fully as quickly as possible. Now, before I take questions on this incident, I would like to give a brief update on the COVID-19 outbreak in Erie County. As of the end of yesterday, there were 6,289 confirmed COVID-19 cases since the beginning of the outbreak in our county, out of 68,767 people tested. Unfortunately, we have had more deaths in our community, and there are now, as of the end of yesterday, 556 individuals who have died as a result of COVID-19. And I offer my